All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eric Ely. I'm the Director of Development for Columbia Athletics. I want to wish everybody health and happiness in these sort of trying times. We thank all of you for joining us. We're excited to have this event. We're excited for Marcellus to join us and talk about his voyage and some thoughts on the draft, the upcoming draft on, I guess, Thursday is the first round. This is the first virtual event that Columbia Athletics has done, and we hope to do more in the coming weeks and months. I'd like to thank my staff for helping set this up, and especially Emily Morey, who has really led us through this process, trying to figure out how to make it all work. A quick note before we start. This specific event was the brainchild of one of our football alums, Matt Sodal, who lives in Southern California, where Sel is. And it's a great example of the interaction and the sharing of ideas between our office and the alumni base that we would really like to promote and continue. So please, if you have ideas about the kind of programming you'd like to see, other kinds of ideas that come into your head, especially these times when we're all home and sort of there's only time to think, please send that to us. We want to engage with people. We want to come up with creative new ideas. So send it to us, email me. And we'll happy to respond and interact with those ideas. If you have any questions during the presentation, just shoot me an email, ee2133@columbia.edu, and I'll either help you out, or if it's a question for Peter or Marcellus, I'll make sure they get it. So to our panelists, Peter Piling, the Campbell Family Director of Intercollegiate Athletics and Physical Education, enters his 5th full academic year at the helm of Columbia Athletics. Peter has had an incredibly successful tenure thus far. In addition to many Ivy League championships that we have won, Peter has shown a real dedication to the health and well-being of our student athletes. Never has that been more clear than over the past month, and how we have been dealt this very interesting and unique situation. And Peter's leadership has been key to helping our student athletes and staff get through that. Marcellus, as you all know, is Columbia College class of 1997. After entering campus as a first-year running back, Marcellus transitioned over to defensive end, led Columbia to an 8-2 record and second place in the Ivy League in his senior year. After graduation, he was the 52nd player drafted in the 1997 NFL Draft, starting a 10-year professional football career with the Buffalo Bills, Chargers, Cowboys, and Jaguars. In 2018, Marcellus released a book entitled Never Shut Up, which is a great read, and I'm going to give it a plug here so Marcellus doesn't have to. It's a great book. It's very entertaining, tells his story in a great long-form narrative. I highly recommend you read it. We are so grateful to have him here. We're so grateful to have his dedication and commitment to Columbia Athletics and Columbia football, and we're really happy to be having this event and be able to pick his head on some of these questions. So I will turn it over to the people you actually want to hear from, Peter and Marcellus, and thank you all for joining us. And I'll come back and touch base with everybody at the end. Thanks.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate the work of you and your team in terms of scheduling and putting this event together. This is awesome. Marcellus, thank you very much. Appreciate you joining us. We're coast to coast on this. Also want to congratulate you and your wife, Anne-Marie, on the birth of your daughter, Olivia. I think she was born on 27th-ish, right around there of March.
Yeah, the 26th, 11/26 at night. Yes, sir.
So congratulations on that. So it's great that you're here. We actually just had a crazy thunderstorm pass through, and your weather looks a little bit better in Southern California. So kudos to you on that one. We're quite envious of your background setting. I could use a few laps in the pool right now, but thank you so much for joining us. We're going to kind of take this, we're going to take it kind of in 3 or 4 different buckets. We'd love to talk about your preparation for the combine, all the different aspects leading, what the actual combine was like, draft day, your draft day experience, a little bit about training camp, your first training camp, and then some of your insight in terms of the 2020 draft, the NFL draft coming on. So I have a series of questions. We actually have a lot of your stats from the combine, which is pretty remarkable. I mean, it's amazing here. You know, you think about your broad jump was 10 feet 2 inches, phenomenal. Last time I think I broad jump was in 6th grade. But yeah. I want to talk to you about like preparation for the combine. How did you, like all the different events leading up to it, how much time did you put into it? I know it seems like a big event now, but give us a little bit of background of preparation for the combine, all the different things you did in terms of preparing for what took place there.
Oh, yes. Thank you once again, Peter, and all the Columbia family for this opportunity. Honored to be in front of so many Lions, talk about the journey. Obviously, because of this week in the NFL draft and it being a virtual draft, kind of taking us back to the days of yesteryear where the NFL was basically a virtual draft. The prospects weren't there, and you made those acquisitions by telephone, and you read in the newspaper the next day who your team drafted. It almost was that not too long ago, and look how far we've journeyed. And we have to return kind of back to that place just for 1 year. My experience was unique, obviously, coming from Columbia, small school. It was just amazing to see all of the recruiters, whether it was general managers or scouts or head coaches, even show up on campus. So once we finished our last game against Brown, which was a victory, in celebration of that, I was also in anticipation of starting my combine process. I was invited to the combine out in Indianapolis, also the East-West Shrine All-Star game. So with Christmas break coming, I used those 6 weeks, kind of this Christmas break month or so, and a week or two where I spent time with my agent and our combine coach. Now, my agent was Brad Blank out of Boston, and at the time, I had the world-renowned combine guru by the name of Mike Boyle. And he was one of the first, if not the first, with notoriety in terms of preparing you specifically for the combine. A lot of trainers at that time was just trying to prepare you in terms of your athleticism and get you bigger, faster, stronger, but nothing specific to those tests at the combine. So we basically went on a 6-week course of how to manipulate the combine, whether it was the broad jump, as you said, how to get your feet placed and your hip and where to explode from, not just jump and hope. Whether it was a vertical jump, how to cheat and try to keep your arm fully extended in perception, but in reality, kind of lower it an inch or two so that when they measured the distance and the difference, you would gain that inch or two in your vertical jump. Not sure how much I mastered that, but certainly that was our mindset. The 40-yard dash, it wasn't just about taking off and running as fast as you could. We had to run 17 steps. So it was our acceleration drive phase, all of these stages of a 40-yard dash. And that 6 weeks was amazing. I was up in Boston with 8 guys that were drafted in the first 2 rounds. And some of those names, Darren Sharper, Jamie Sharper, James Ferrier, top 10 picks, you name it, and all from big schools. And then it was myself there. And I gained a lot of confidence in that training program because it was the first time I got to remove myself from the program and everyone doubting that I could play at the big level because I went to a small school. So when you run a 40 against a guy who went to Virginia or USC, whatever it may be, and you beat him, you start to realize that, hey, I can make it on the next level because I'm bringing my talents, not necessarily the collective school or the program with me. So I started to gain a lot of confidence. And it's crazy enough, I was very nervous for the combine because, like in class, you know how your final grade is dependent upon your midterm and your final exam, and it's 50% final exam. Well, for me, mentally, I was looking at the combine like it was 95% in terms of my final grade of becoming a prospect. And I actually underperformed at the combine, which is crazy because I think all of my testing was top 5 for my position, and I won a few categories. But based on my practice performances, I actually had better numbers in practice in most categories. So it was a wild ride. I went from undrafted before the season started when we had our scrimmage against Dartmouth on the road. At the end of the season, I think I was a 6th rounder by most regards. After the combine, I moved it to 4th, 3rd round, and then the East-West game and all those things started to pick up for me, and I end up being a second rounder with some first round projections. But in terms of that combine experience, nerve wracking. I saw some amazing athletes, amazing performances, and I also saw Orlando Pace, who was the #1 pick overall, walk around with flip flops, just like a laminate, and just laughing with a T-shirt on, like, y'all go out there and work hard for your draft position because I'm already guaranteed to be #1. So it was eye-opening.
That's awesome. So let me back up a little bit. You mentioned your agent, Brad. What was that process by how you selected agents? Were a lot of agents coming to Columbia at the time and they were recruiting you? And ultimately, how did you make that determination to go with Brad?
Yeah, they were coming on campus. And they were meeting with me, talking. You would get the phone calls. I remember back in the days before cell phones, obviously, we had the ROM phone, which is our dorm phone. And in my ROM phone, boy, every day, a voicemail full, people calling, just as soon as I get in the room and I check the voicemail, the light will beep again, or I was on the phone. It was just constantly the recruiting process. And it was exciting. It was really exciting to be on College Walk, to get that level of fanfare and attention. It was really exciting. But Brad stuck out because Brad was an Ivy Leaguer himself, went to Brown undergrad, and more importantly, he worked with a few small school players that were drafted high, including Mike Mamula,
right,
who was the 7th overall pick from Boston College. And he tore up the combines, and more importantly, Brad represented him, and I wanted to be with someone who understood the Ivy League experience, but also that had a path to get me drafted as high as I could without anything being an obstacle. So he was a great guy, great personality, great man of character. So we joined forces. As soon as I finished my senior year game against Brown, I signed on with Brad, and we were off to the races.
Awesome. So you mentioned a little bit about the physical preparation. You mentioned obviously all the different drills and the shuttles and the times and all the weight training from that standpoint. What did they do around like psychological or the interview process or the Wonderlic? What kind of preparation did they get you there? And then what was that like? I mean, seems like nowadays, you're in this room, you go and talk to that GM, they ask you some crazy questions. What was that process like in terms of preparation for the psychological side of the combine?
Yeah, I mean, the latitude of experience is so wide ranging. Some tests were forever long. Some tests were just so abstract and really try to get under your skin. And I think they were just throwing adversity at you in verbiage just to see how you responded. Like, they couldn't test necessarily how you would respond in the fire against grown men in the NFL, but they wanted to see how you mentally process just hearing how adversity would look or how it sounded. And you just had to respond properly. So for me, it was wild because Columbia wasn't helping me in terms of film evaluation because they didn't respect my opponents as much. But it was helping me in all the psychological, mental evaluations where I could skip the line. They were like, oh, don't ask Wiley that. That guy's smart. Oh, don't ask Wiley that, man. He went to Columbia. And I was just sitting there like, okay, I hope this all helps. So, it was a little yin-yang in terms of how I was received as a Columbia Lion. But those tests, you just had to make sure you kept your composure first and foremost, right? Because they asked you some questions. Have you ever wet the bed? And for me, that really triggered me because I did wet the bed all the way to the age of 13. And I'm sitting there like, how do I answer this? Because if I tell them I'm a bedwetter as a teenager, maybe they look at it a different direction. But I just told the truth. I said, look, man, my last time doing that was at 13. Their eyes were like, whoa, what is going on here? And I said, trust me, it's all behind me. But the Wonderlic was really interesting in terms of structure. Obviously, there's a reading part, and then there's a math section. And if you're smart, if you're cool, calm, and collected, you realize that you should do the math first, those first 25 questions, and then the reading, the second 25, because of how long it takes you to just read through the question, let alone answer the question. But it took me about 10 questions where I was doing the reading first. for that light bulb to go off. Like, what am I doing? Because they give it to you where the readings first. And I think that's the first question. Out of 50 questions, I think the 51st question, and really the first one is he going to be smart enough to do the math first?
Got it.
And most guys run out of time, 50 questions. You have 12 minutes. And once I figure that out, I start plowing through it. And I got a 35 out of 50. And I think that may have been top 3, certainly top 5. But
Right.
someone killed it. I think someone got a 50. And they went to Harvard. And I'm
Yeah. Actually, remember the punter that played for the Bengals, a wide receiver, Pat McAnally. So our crack staff actually found out your Wonderlic score. So that was it, correct 35, which was, I should note, a higher score than Tom Brady. So, then Pat McAnally, but you alluded to Mike Mamula. Mamula had a 49 on his Wonderlic, and then Ryan Fitzpatrick, who played quarterback at Harvard, had a 48. Those are the top 3 scores. But 35 is at the top of the stratosphere. So let me ask you this. If you think about this, sometimes, it seems like the Wonderlic scores leak every year, and some of you hear what Tula's score, whether it's this quarterback's score. What is the value of that? Is it just for the ability to kind of assess in terms of how you process things? And if you're a GM, Marcellus, how do you assess what the value of the Wonderlic score is?
Yeah, you're basically trying to change the variables in any equation and see how you respond to that different equation. So a simple one is they will give you a math problem, but it will be more of a word problem rather than just simple numbers. So it'll be the same variables, whether you're just basically adding up Tom had 12, Jim had 11, but they would give it to you in story. And they wanted to see if you were able to extract what was most important from the story to get those variables. So how does that relate to football? Every time we go out there and practice a play that we want to run and the play we expect the defense or the other side of the ball to run, there's always something that's going to happen different, a different wrinkle or a complexion change. Someone goes in motion, and you have to be able to extract what's most important. So it actually comes into play when I saw it happen in terms of being in NFL. One of my first training camps, my coach was telling me, Marcellus, your keys are off. What are you watching? What are you focusing on? And I'm like, I'm looking at the tackle. And he's like, yeah, the tackle can only do 6 things. He can go forward, backwards, forward, left, forward, right, backwards, left, backwards, right. That's it. No more. And he's like, forget the man in motion. Forget the guard. Forget the center. Forget all the other stuff. And it loosely kind of went back to what a Wonderlic was, where forget all the other words. All you need to know is Tom had 12 and Jim had 11. Add it up. It's 23. Right. And I was like, so there were some aha moments that the Wonderlic translated actually onto the field.
Right. So when you arrived at the Combine, 2-3 days, is that kind of the length of period of time you were there? And they kind of give you your schedule. And so you know, for example, when you're doing your 40, when you're doing your bench press, and then they just fill in all the other times with team meetings, GMs that want to talk to you. And then literally you go on from 8 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, you're hitting the bed, and then off you're going to the next day. What would the day have consisted of?
Yeah, it's a wild one, man. And everybody's different based on position groups. At first was medical. Day 1 was medical. They poke and prod you, get you on the machines and test your strength, the physicals, everything. So they really tax your legs first. And then after that, it's time to have some of the interviews. The next day, get into the physical reps. And you just look around, everyone's doing something else differently in a different order. So you may start off as a receiver and doing a vertical jump, but then the D-line has to start off doing a 40. So, everyone's sitting there like desiring that they get their 40 done quickly before they have to do everything else that's taxing. But that's just the way the game goes. So for me, I was in a group with Jason Taylor. He's the one that stood out for me. Small school, Akron, ends up going to the Hall of Fame, drafted the same year, amazing player. And Jason, when he first got there, he was like, I'm going first round. I was like, man, you went to a small school. You sure you're going first round? He's like, yeah. I bought 2 cars. I got my name in them, etched out, sketched out. JT, first round, all this stuff. And I'm like, all right, well, good for you. And I watched him perform in the combine, and he was insane, like a cheetah, like just a cat, just jumping around doing stuff. He was like 6'6", 230, 240. And I was like, woo, he is going first round. He is killing this combine. But he suffered because he was a tweener. Mm-hmm. They didn't know if he was a linebacker or a D lineman. So this is the era and the transition from defensive end should look like me, which was 6'4", 280, and they should look like Jason, which is a little longer, rangier, quicker. And I was like the last of the Mohicans that were from the old guard, the big, strong, stop the run and play the pass. Then they just said, forget that, just play the pass and we'll figure out who can stop the run. And so Jason ended up going third round. And I remember comparing everything I did on the field to him. And that was like my barometer. But going through all the testing, you just lock in. There are guys from big schools, Alabama, Arkansas, USC, Florida. And what was amazing was how many of those guys, in terms of individual athleticism and talent, weren't that special. I remember seeing one guy, a defensive lineman, only bench press 6 times. And he went to a big school, I think an SEC school. And I was sitting there like, whoa. And, we're all laughing, commenting, trying to be respectful, but we're still in this bubble, teammates. We were like, damn, you were hiding behind your program because, boy, you are weak. So those kind of things were going back and forth. But as much as we were intense because our livelihoods were on the line, we also kept it lax and loose.
That's awesome. All right, let's shift a little to the draft, the night of the draft. So in '97, was it the same type of format where they have the first round one night and then they shift, or were there multiple rounds into the first day or first?
Oh, there were multiple rounds.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Where were you? What was your agent telling you? Draft days, all these crazy rumors going around. People are trying to posture and position. Tell us about draft day, where you were, who you were with, and kind of what your feelings were about where you were going to be drafted.
Yeah, in terms of emotions, I tried not to let them run in front of me and get away from me because there was a report. And I think what really changed everything is New York Times wrote an article and said that I should have been the 17th pick overall. Now, I remind you, a few months ago, I was undrafted, and now they're saying I could be 17th overall. And that kind of changed everything in terms of where should I go and should I be at the draft? Should I not be at the draft, be at home? But I end up choosing to go home. CNN, Sports Illustrated were there in the home. I lived in this small apartment in Los Angeles. I would say the size of a EC campus room or like maybe wing plus, like one of those rooms. That was my entire apartment. And they crammed my family, friends, these camera crews. And it started early in the morning, man, because we're on the West Coast. So I think it started at 8 a.m., first round. And it was forever, the first round. And then, we get around pick 17, and I won't lie to my Lion family. Around 17, I was like, all right, I might hear my name, but I try my damnedest not to think that way because I wanted to be appreciative of wherever I was drafted. But then it really got bad because Chris Berman, who was doing the broadcast on ESPN, started to mention my name, partly because he knew that I should have been drafted around there, according to the scouts. But more importantly, he was also an Ivy Leaguer, so he was rooting for me. Every time he mentioned my name and they didn't call it, I was like, oh, God, this is torture. This is hell. I ended up going in the second round, 52nd overall, which is a high selection, but it took probably 8 hours to get there. Like, it was like 3-4 in the afternoon. So you have all the adrenaline in the beginning because it's the draft. Of course, Orlando Pace went first. You're eating all the hors d'oeuvres and appetizers, sipping on a little drink, hanging with the family, friends, everybody swapping stories. You're really just trying to pass time until that name is called. And it took us about 8 hours. So I end up dozing off. There's pictures and video of my dad actually sleeping. Like everyone just had an adrenaline deficit. just waiting for your name to be called.
Yeah. And then did you feel like, hey, obviously Mel Kiper was probably the draft expert back then, and now they're like, 112 draft experts. But did you feel like there was 2 or 3 teams that you thought were looking for a defensive end? Did you feel like the Buffalo Bills were one of them? And had there been certain teams that had been communicating with you that you kind of said, gosh, if my name pops here, these guys have we've had a chummy relationship, and I kind of feel like this is a good partnership. And then sometimes you hear these crazy stories about, yeah, I got drafted by the Bengals and they didn't chat with me once. They didn't, I didn't even know they were there. What was that process like, and how much interaction did you have with the Bills prior to being drafted by them?
Yeah, that's funny you said the Bengals. That's actually the team I thought was going to draft me. If you made me swear on a stack of Bibles, I would say the Cincinnati Bengals. In part because of need, but more so our workout at Columbia. So you have your combine workout. Then we had a private pro day workout at Columbia's facilities. Rory Wilfork, myself, and some other prospects. And Cincinnati really took an interest to me in terms of working me out, staying after, extra detail in their interview, and even having me work out at linebacker. And I was like, this car goes forward, not backwards, but they were trying to see if I could. And that was exciting. But I left thinking that, yeah, Cincinnati, they're showing the strongest interest. And so at our pro day, there were only 30 teams in the league at that time, not 32. 28 teams were at our pro day, and 2 were missing, including one, the Buffalo Bills that drafted me. They didn't even show up. I never talked to them at the combines, didn't do the interview, no Marv Levy, no John Butler, rest in peace. I never talked to any execs from Buffalo. And then on draft day, who chooses me? Buffalo. So, yeah, I had no idea that they were that interested, especially because of their roster. They had Bruce Smith, who was still killing the game, and they had a tremendous defense, but that's where I was headed.
Wow, that's amazing. So then you get drafted. Was it like it is now where literally the GM will pick up the phone to the head coach and they call you right before and they said, hey, we're going to pick you here? Was it the same type of format that they do now?
Yeah. It was the phone rings and you're like, I mean, remind you now, it's been 8 hours, so the phone was ringing before too, and it's just, hey, Domino's, we're at the front, open the door, like, that kind of stuff. So it was finally John Butler, who I've never talked to before, never heard of. So I'm like, hello, hey, big, deep, burly voice. You ready to be a Buffalo Bill? I was like, yeah. And then he puts on a familiar voice, Marv Levy.
Wow.
And I was like, ah. So I'm listening to Marv Levy just like, oh, my goodness. And whatever he would have asked me, I would have said yes to. I would have given away my first contract, my firstborn. I didn't care. I was just so excited. And just to hear his voice, because everyone knew Marv Levy's voice.
Absolutely.
And he's like, yeah, we're excited to have you here. We have tremendous talent on our roster. We think you can come in and have an immediate impact. And I'm like, immediate impact? Y'all got Bruce Smith and Phil Hansen. I ain't playing. I'm not stupid, but thank you for the opportunity. So from there, it's a 5-minute phone call, if that. And then your life just really changes. And it's not even economically. You don't get your check.
Right.
Nothing changes like in terms of your lifestyle. Like I slept at that same small apartment that night for days, for weeks. But what happened was all of a sudden you're getting itineraries sent to you. And it's like, yes, there's a first class ticket for you at the airport. Just show up. When you land, there's a guy with a Buffalo Bills polo on saying, come with me. And everything all of a sudden became VIP. And I was just like, this is crazy. And you're starting to see other guys that got drafted, and then you walk into the locker room facilities, and then you start seeing those nameplates. And they say Thomas, Thurman Thomas, Reed, Andre Reed, Smith, Bruce Smith. You're like, damn. Then it's like yours is in tape with a Sharpie marker. Wiley. So you're excited.
So you went there right after the draft, and they do the media side of it, everything, and then they spend some time, and then you eventually come back comparable to OTAs now. What they do now? Were you coming back for some try to just do some initial planning before training camp?
Yes, wow. Back in those days, we only had a mandatory mini camp, and that was it. So we showed up late April, early May for 2 days. We worked out that weekend, and that was it. See you in August.
Wow.
We were like, okay, that was the norm. And then every single offseason from that point on, they would add a couple more days, and then OTAs, and then, voluntary camp. And next thing you know, there was no off season like it is now. But when I first got into the league, give us 2-3 days, and that's it. We'll see you when we see you in training camp. So I got a chance to go out there for the marketing tour. So the first 2 selections, Antoine Smith, who was our first rounder, a running back, and myself. And that was special too. It was weird being second round because I got all of the good things without all of the pressure. Like you should have heard the questions that they would ask me versus asking Antoine. Like everything about Antoine was, you're starting from day one. You're going to take Thurman Thomas's job. You're going to be the man. You have to, or you're a bust. And I was sitting there like, okay, good luck with that. Versus me, it was like, well, you're really raw. You're from a small school. They have great defensive ends. Talk about how you're going to work your way into the lineup. And I was like, damn, they're giving me a 2-3 year runway, and they're giving Antoine 2 days. So it was a little different in terms of the immediate pressure, but exciting. You get to see everyone in the neighborhood, the community, executives. Everyone walks up to you with a happiness and a joy, just excited. The clean slate of being 0-0 as a team and you as a prospect, and the sky was the limit at those moments. So it was just really exciting to see how warm the welcome was, and welcome to the NFL.
Yeah, I lived in southern part of New York there, about 2 hours below when I was at St. Bonaventure, and I know the impact of what the Buffalo Bills means to that community. It's remarkable. So I've asked you a series of questions around the draft day and training camp. I just want to thank a couple of our alums. They've been asking these questions, and I haven't acknowledged them. I want to thank Javier Loya, who is a minority owner of the Texans, for that one of his questions, and for Scott Smith, and then also for Jack Gassler, who is a 78 grad on the football program, for really insightful questions. Did you have like this holy crap moment where all of a sudden you were in Buffalo, you were in your apartment, and you was like, man, I am in the NFL? Did you have that moment where it just kind of hit you that you're in a big time NFL with a big time program that's got a great history? What was that like?
Yeah, there was a good one and there was a bad one. I'll start with the bad one. The bad one was, I think, maybe my third training camp practice. And so we had perennial Pro Bowlers on the offensive line. Reuben Brown in particular, who was a guard and was a beast. I think he made like 8-9 Pro Bowls in a row. And he was really good. And when you size him up, you look at him, you're like, I don't know if the name matches the guy I'm looking at. He didn't look the part necessarily, but damn, he played the part. So you come out of college and you got your go-to moves and you think they're going to work at the pro level because they worked on the collegiate level. Even though you know these guys are better, you're like, I have to do what I'm best at or I have no chance. So I did an inside move with a swim, thinking it was going to work like it did against Harvard. And Reuben was sitting there waiting on a fan block. And I tried to hit the tackle. I actually beat John Fina, the tackle. And Reuben was fanning. And when he hit me, the defibrillator, like, boom. I mean, he shot me in the chest and hit me. And we're doing one-on-one drills, O-line, D-line, way in the corner, side field, right by a fence. And he drove me into the fence. And I was back. And everybody's like, ooh, damn, Reuben stalled him out. He's just a rook, whatever. So then I'm like a little embarrassed, but more so kind of confused. Like, if my go-to moves are not working, it's going to be a long, forget practice, long season, career. So I'm sitting there, and then I'm trying to go back to the practice. And then all of a sudden I realized I'm stuck in the fence. My jersey was locked into the fence, so the equipment manager had to bum rush me to like cut the fence to kind of like get me untangled from it. Meanwhile, all of the fans are looking, I'm sure laughing. My teammates are looking like, dog, you sorry. And I'm just now my embarrassment is this high. And I'm just sitting there like, oh my God, what a way to start off your career. But that was the bad moment. The good moment was our first game on the road. And we got to play against the Denver Broncos. I was a huge Eric Dickerson, John Elway guy growing up. Those were my two guys. And man, to land Mile High Stadium, and I'm sitting there, Peter, I run out the locker room, and you can't breathe because it's Mile High Stadium, so I'm already fatigued. It's my first NFL game. I'm wondering if it's really the altitude or I'm so nervous I can't breathe. And then we're warming up. We're doing our jumping jacks, everything. We go through team drill, and I'm a backup, so I'm watching. I'm at the 50-yard line watching our team warm up, Bruce Smith and those guys. And then something told me, turn around. Just turn around, see what the Broncos are doing. Mind you, my favorite players were Elway and Dickerson. Moms told me I couldn't even buy an Elway jersey when I was like in 11th grade. I wanted one or something. She was like, no way, you can get that. So I'm sitting there watching us perform and practice and warm up, and then I just started to turn. And as I turned, literally about face, 3 yards from me, like hands distance, was John Elway 7. The real one, not the Foot Locker one I wanted to buy, the real dude. And I just was like, That was my moment where I was like, I am in the NFL and these dudes are for real. All those legends are not on the television screen. They're right here in the flesh.
That's awesome. How about through training camp and then early on? Like, was there some rookie events? I know that typically through training camp, you have to do some singing, some different activities. They try to embarrass you. Were you kind of labeled the Ivy League guy? What were some of those experiences like?
Yeah, being an Ivy League guy, I immediately was voted against my will as a player rep for us, for the Buffalo Bills.
Wow.
And literally, like almost physically forced to do it. I was in there, they were voting, and I'm a rookie, so I'm not thinking about representing the team as a player rep for the NFLPA. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the voting, they were like, any names? And they said the 5-6 names. And then they were like, Wiley. And everybody's like, yeah, Wiley. He went to Columbia. He's smart. It's like, wait a minute. Do what? You mean represent this team in negotiations? And they were like, yeah. And they voted me a player rep. Like, no experience, nothing. Just like, you went to Columbia, damn it, you're smarter than most of us, if not all of us. You are the player rep. So that was hilarious. In terms of hazing, I'm old NFL. So, yeah, the hazing was for real. Like, for real. Like, getting beat up, triple teamed by 300-pounders. So my worst experience was I got duct taped to the goalpost in the winter with baby powder and baby oil thrown on me. And I wasn't the only one out there. Just naked, goalpost, baby powder, throwing stuff at me. I don't know what else. Empty, old practice clothes, nastiness everywhere. But the craziest part was Thurman Thomas grabbed me first. And he's small, so I kind of was winning. Even though he's crafty and I was respecting the elder, I was winning. Then I think like an old lineman jumped in. And I was holding my own. They couldn't get me out the locker room. I was holding my own at the young muscles. So I was kind of holding my own. But then Ted Washington jumped on. And I don't know who Ted Washington is. Mount Ted Washington was his nickname. He's the largest mammal in human history. This dude was 6'7", 390 or something crazy. And when he jumped on me, all of the life in me just left, just departed. I had no strength. So that triple team took me down, and next thing you know, I was naked on the goalpost.
All right. We'll take that as a conduit to shift to the draft, the 2020 draft. What are your thoughts on, obviously, the pandemic, and you see these pictures of all these coaches' offices in their house and all the different screens they have. How do you think the pandemic is going to impact the draft and what takes place? I think last night they actually did a mock draft. They were just throwing names out. I heard there were some technical issues. How do you think this separation, if you will, is going to impact the draft?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of anxiety around the glitches. Like you said, the mock draft didn't go perfectly. those kind of things. The technical part's going to be somewhat of an issue, I would expect. Like, you have to walk in thinking a glitch here or there. In terms of evaluation, I think who suffers the most are players like myself, the smaller schools, the guys who are on the borderline of being in the latter round or undrafted, the diamonds in the rough. It's going to be tough in terms of maybe technically and getting the information and transmitting all of that, or really taking that risk because you don't have the same freedom with the technology, not being around each other, not being able to really bounce back all ideas in real time as a collective. I'm certain that they're going to do their best with their own Zoom technologies, but it may be a little slower in terms of buffering, in terms of really transmitting how passionate you are on a prospect versus another. So Patrick Mahomes, everyone knows who he is. If you talk to Brett Beats, their general manager, as we did last week, he was talking about how adamant he was about Patrick Mahomes is the best prospect I've ever seen.
Wow.
I don't know if you're able to convey that to the tune of the Chiefs moving up in the draft and doing that off of a computer screen the same as you could if you're right there in front of the decision makers. So that may be a hindrance. But all in all, I think you've done your homework. You're fully prepared. And you just have to walk with conviction. It's a little different in years past. It takes some of the doubt out of the conversation, and you just have to walk with that conviction.
Yeah, it seems obviously you see these pictures of the war room during draft day, and there's 20 people around the table, and it seems like there's a lot of exchange of information and discussion, especially when they get to their draft pick. And obviously the trade piece of this, it just seems like the dynamics of Brett talking to Andy Reid about a draft pick and then picking up the phone and talk to somebody else. Just the logistics around this seem very, very complicated.
Really does. And I've been able to see the war room. It's like the trade floor at Wall Street. It's just like, it's madness. At the same time, there are so many mocks that they run. You have to run several mocks just to deal with all the curveballs that may come. Everyone is thinking Joe Burrow's the first pick. What if he's not? Then you have to have a mock that obviously deals with that change in terms of selection. So you just have to have the understanding of who's in the room and the percentage of influence that person has, and really run it up the chain as fast as you can. Because if not, what was it? Minnesota one year missed their pick.
Missed their pick. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, back then that was laughable, and it's a moment of infamy. But imagine that happened now because of the coronavirus and the pandemic and the technology. You won't be able to live that down. And even though we continue to see that this may not be a smooth transaction, no excuses are allowed, even the fact that we've seen it before, a team missed their selection, and that was not even during a pandemic, just miscommunication.
Right. You mentioned Joe Burrow. That one seems like an interesting quandary that a lot of people are obviously very, very talented. He had a remarkable year at LSU last year, as great as any quarterback has had in the history of college football. But the year before, so. And so, what goes into it? And then, at the combine, I'm not even sure he threw at the combine. He may have just gone for interviews. There's not a pro day at LSU. Everybody's pro days kind of got shot down. What are the Cincinnati Bengals thinking about as they assess this and think about, gosh, are we going to pull the trigger with somebody that could be a franchise Hall of Fame type quarterback, or to some degree, another good quarterback?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up in terms of there is a complexion difference between looking at him in one season and then looking at his entire career, and they're different. Yeah. So some conversation is he a one-hit wonder? Remember being at Ohio State and not being able to beat out Dwayne Haskins, injured, just not being the better prospect at the time, transferring, not having a tremendous junior year, and then linking up with Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator, who comes from the New Orleans Saints and the pro-style offense, and with the weapons that they had at LSU, He had a perfect season, basically, a perfect season. He did everything you can ask for. So now if you're Cincinnati, you look at this hometown kid who had a perfect season, and you're like, we might have to roll the dice on this. It's too good to be true. It's too storybook. It's LeBron to the Cavaliers almost, like in that respect. But there are the naysayers, and I'll raise my hand. I'm a naysayer in terms of Joe Burrow being undoubtedly the better prospect over Tua. Like, for me, Tua's body of work speaks volumes. I understand the injury concern, but we play a contact sport, and he's been injured, and I'm not so certain if he's injury prone as much as this is a guy, because of schedule and calendar at times, elected to have a surgery to make sure he got back on the field faster. But now that's being used against him, when at the time we were applauding him for his courage. So for me, the better prospect is Tua. There's no conversation about will he translate his game to the NFL. He throws the best football we've seen, maybe ever, out of a collegiate passer, holds the highest passing efficiency rating in college football history. And even last year, before injury, had a higher efficiency rating than Joe Burrow, who was having a perfect year, but he lost it because he didn't qualify because of injury. So for my money, I would roll the dice and say, hey, the injury concerns, I'm going to put them to the side and go with Tua. But if you're Cincinnati, it's hard to pass up on the hometown kid.
Yeah, great point. Where do you see depth in this year's draft? You hear a lot of stories about a lot of good wide receivers. Where do you see the depth of this draft and where people's emphasis might be in the first and second rounds?
Yeah, because of the passing game and the wide receiver depth. Yeah, and I think wide receiver is going to be a deep position going forward in the next 5-10 years minimum. And it's actually happening on the youth level. So much of the sociology of football and of sports is fascinating to me if you really look at the younger youth level. When I was growing up, no one wanted to play quarterback. Everyone wanted to be the running back. When I walked onto my first football field, the line to be the running back was the longest. No one wanted to be the quarterback as a youngster. And then the money starts to come into it, the protection of the position, the longevity of the position. It switched from no one wanted to be the running back, everybody wanted to be the quarterback. And now everyone wants to be the quarterback, but no one wants to be the running back. They want to be the wide receiver. Think about it. You get to be on the outside of the formation. The guy across from you weighs 190 pounds versus playing running back. There are 7 to 9 dudes right there in the box, and their average weight is like 250. You're like, I think I'd rather be on the outside and catch 5 passes for 100 yards. So the game is shifted towards wide receiver, obviously, the quarterback-wide receiver combination, and this year certainly symbolizes that as well. I expect 5 players to go in the first round at the wide receiver position. So I would say wide receiver, as most evaluators are saying. But also offensive line is going to go pretty high. If you want to talk about some of the depth there, got to protect the quarterback. You got to give the quarterback time to get the ball to the wide receiver. So I think that's where you're going to see really the value is outside of some outliers, Isaiah Simmons, who's a linebacker, safety, cornerback, every position from Clemson. And obviously you can look at Chase Young, who's a defensive lineman who will go high, probably second overall. You're going to see a lot of receivers and O-linemen go.
Yeah, that's great. So in terms of the quarterback, you see what Patrick Mahomes did. You see what the Chiefs did in terms of working up the draft. Do you feel everybody sees like, okay, we got to find the next Patrick Mahomes. We got to try to recreate what Andy Reid's system does and see how offenses may go in cycles. I'll illustrate this with there's a quarterback out of Utah State named Jordan Love who will probably get picked in the first round. My daughter went to school at Utah State. I saw him play a couple different times, had a really good junior year, had a really bad senior year. But it seems like he's kind of on these draft boards because he's agile. He's a little Mahomes-ish. It doesn't seem like normally he would fit other than the fact that certain people like Mahomes are doing what he has the capacity to do.
Yeah, it's a copycat league. And we see it in play calling, formations, hires. A couple years ago when Sean McVay hit the ground running, they were looking for every Sean McVay lookalike. Matt Nagy, give me anybody. Like whoever touched the cloth of the great Sean McVay, hire him as the head coach. And they did that. They're going to do the same in terms of quarterback. And and his attributes. If you resemble anything that is Patrick Mahomes-ish, you have just went up the draft charts, and that's going to be Jordan Love this year. I actually have a friend, a former player, TJ Houshmandzadeh, who works out with Jordan and said early in this process was like, the kid is special. So I think there is some substance to him moving up this draft, obviously trying to emulate what you get out of Patrick Mahomes. But Patrick Mahomes is special. That baseball background really serves him well in football. The off-angle throws, the ability to trust your arm in all situations, his mobility, his moxie. The fact that his father was a former pro athlete, like his dinner table conversations were just different than the average athlete. All of that comes into play. But, yeah, Jordan Love is going to be a guy that they try to certainly insert into that same mindset, that same place on their roster and saying that's the next Mahomes.
Yeah. Any other draft insight? You know, the Ivy League has, I think last year we had 24 Ivy League players on NFL rosters. I don't know if you followed the Ivy League as close. Any insight on maybe some sleepers or some things that we should be looking for as we observe the draft?
Yeah, for most evaluators, I hear Kevin Davidson seems like the guy that is prototypical 6'4", 225, not mobile, so that's going to hurt from the quarterback out of Princeton. A lot of people talk about. It's interesting in terms of FCS. There are a lot of names, but the Ivy League seems down in numbers, it seems, in terms of what everyone is forecasting that can happen. So Rawlings, the quarterback, was he from Yale? He's nice. He's a playmaker, so not so much prototypical, but if you want to talk about Mahomes and what works, I think a lot of people are talking about Kurt Rawlings. It seems like Davidson would be the first one. Rawlings, Prince Imali, I might mess his name up, but from Princeton, I saw some plays from him. A little smaller but explosive, powerful defensive lineman from Penn. He looked good. So I was looking for who's the guy who's going to be the first rounder, second rounder, fourth rounder, and it seems like it's a little lower in projections, at least this year for the Ivy League. But I think in summation, Kevin might be the highest one at quarterback. Yeah.
Any final thoughts? If you're somebody that's a potential draftee, what is going through their mind right now? Some of the different anxieties they're dealing with, especially with the current circumstances. What counsel, what advice would you get to somebody that could achieve this goal and be drafted in the NFL and achieve their milestone?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty similar to what I felt, which is don't let this ceremony, this introduction to the NFL, no matter how well it goes or how bad it goes in terms of your expectations, really alter the fact that you just made your dream a reality. Like, I think so much gets caught up on when did you get drafted? Where did you get drafted? Were they high on you? Were they low on you? And you're already losing sight of what's most important. You're in the NFL. Now let's go make some hay. Let's go make this happen. I would say that a lot of challenges are ahead. No matter how good, how great you were, there's still going to be a test of not just your skill, but a greater test of your will. Are you really up to the task? In the immeasurables, in the intangibles, not just the tangibles, how big and fast and strong you are. And then most important, I think, just realize that your life has changed, not just on the outside. I'm talking about the family dynamic has changed for many of these guys. And you become not only head of household, but head of family, a lot of situations, because it's not about if you're the smartest in the family, the wisest in the family. You just became the richest in the family for most of these guys. And all things start and stop with you now. And it's a lot to put on a 22-year-old in terms of financial understanding and management, in terms of how to really deal with family issues. How much do you expend of yourself? How much do you give of yourself in these moments? And how much do you stay selfish because you have a task at hand, which is playing football to the best of your ability? So it's a process full of growing pains, but don't lose the joy throughout all of it.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like the NFL does a good job in terms of training and methodology. You know, you talked about finances. That's obviously a huge issue. When I was at another school, we had a running back that was projected to be a first, second, third round pick, and his knee injury didn't recover like they thought. He went out and bought, he and his wife, matching BMWs, and he ended up getting picked in the 7th round and ended up getting cut that year. And, you know, it's like you just get out in front of your skis on this stuff sometimes financially. And so what financial advice would you give these people in terms, you know, you read these stories about Gronk, he saved every one of his paychecks, he lived off endorsements. It seems like it's really, really vital. You make a tremendous amount of money over a very short period of time, the necessity to be financially sound, and probably to some extent, you have to say no to family members in difficult situations too.
Yeah, it's a tremendous burden, even though it's a tremendous blessing in the same scope. One, you just have to walk in and understand that you don't know exactly the full value of money. I think for most guys, that's a general rule. Just, I don't care how much you think you know and how versed you are and how great you are as a player and already thinking about your second contract and the millions you will attain. Kind of walk in thinking that you need to read Money for Dummies, because the power of the dollar, just in the fact that you won't even receive $1, you're going to receive 50 cents on every dollar you get. So you sign for $10 million, everyone in your family, man, you made 10 million, 10 million. You keep hearing 10 million. You need to check them like they're saying your name wrong. No, I made 5 million. Like, that already starts to put the wet blanket on the expectations, and hopefully lets people understand, whoa, Uncle Sam, agent, financial advisor, money manager, team, whatever that may look like, marketing, everyone wants a piece and they're going to get a piece. So before you even get that dollar, you're already at 50 cents pretty much. More than that, it's just the fact that you have to learn not just to say no, but to learn to say no without guilt. Right. And that takes time. There's a big difference. Everyone says, just say no. You can't just say no to moms and dad and sister. Like, you get a check, and that check is for $2.8 million. And your sister calls you and she needs $5,000. You're looking at the check, and then you're hearing 5,000, 2.8 million. There are a lot of commas over here. Over here is only one. And you're like, no, I'm just trying to be realistic, not just idealistic. So that you have to work a plan. You have to have a plan before you even get into those situations. And then you have to attack them within the plan. Say, look, what are the asks? What are the demands? Let's put that all in front of the financial advisor. Let's sit down together. Sometimes that's a good cop, bad cop relationship between you and the financial advisor. And you get a plan so that it's not all these one-offs that turn into, wow, I end up giving you $50,000 when it started off with just one $5,000 ask. So I think a lot of players just need to understand, just say no, but say it without guilt so that you don't continuously feel that pressure that mounts up and adds up to you finally caving into something that's not according to your plan. So it's a lot to it. There are growing pains, obviously, but don't go. Yeah, a lot of guys did it, man. I'm glad I didn't. I bought a Ford Expedition, and people were like, "Whoa, that, I could have bought more," but I was like, "Nah." They have 4 wheels and they get me where I gotta go. So take it easy.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Eric has one question. I had a couple final comments, but Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, Marcellus, we have one more question from an alum. I know we're running out of time, but Frank Furlow wanted you to talk just for a couple of minutes about how you transitioned into your sort of TV career and how that started. How did that idea come to you? Did people approach you? If you could just give us a couple of minutes on sort of how that initially transition started to happen.
Yeah, to sum it up, I think it started with my parents. They gave me the gift of gab, whatever. Maybe I like to talk. So always, like, anybody knows me, I'm going to talk. So I've always been a talker. And I think that going to Columbia obviously gives you a tremendous confidence to understand that you can walk into any room and articulate your feelings, your emotions, and do it well. Get into the NFL, the blessing of Columbia wasn't just the curriculum and the understandings of how I could be around intelligent people and fit in well. It was also the fact that coming from Columbia, I wasn't tired of big business football. I met so many rookies that were just disgusted with like an interview or signing autographs or reporters. I was like, why are you so damn mad and fatigued and tired and despondent? And they were like, man, I'm tired of people always wanting something. I'm like, hey, you want something? I got it. I'll sign another ball. Another question? Okay, whatever. Like, I just wasn't tired of big business football. And that served me well because I established tremendous relationships and heartfelt like emotions and relationships and correspondence with people. I didn't just give PC answers. I didn't just try to just get through the interview. I really answered it. And I wasn't doing it as a teacher's pet or anything. It was just the way I felt and the way I was groomed from my experiences. So when it was over, ESPN called me and wanted me to come do a typical player interview, retired player interview. But I didn't know that they really thought of it as a job interview because they had saw some of my work of the past. So I literally went to ESPN thinking I'm just doing another round of interviews. And I did a few of the shows, the car wash. You blink, I'm hosting Mike and Mike when Mike Greenberg's out with Mike Golick. And I'm like, what is going on here? And it kind of snowballed. That was 2007. And I've been talking for 13 years ever since.
Yeah, you're doing a great job of that. Marcellus, thank you. I just wanted to share one. I think some of you may be aware, but you know, a couple years ago when Coach Bagnoli came in, we raised a lot of money for the bubble over the soccer field. It's been a great benefit to our sports that compete down there. I know our football program has really been a beneficiary of it. And some of you may have seen, and a lot of you on this phone call contributed to the bubble. We want to thank you for that. But a couple weeks ago, the bubble was converted to a field hospital. And right now there are COVID-19 patients in our bubble. So it's been really meaningful in terms of us fighting this, you know, different challenge here in New York City and to contribute in a unique way. You know, when we raised the bubble money for the bubble, we never envisioned how it could be utilized in this way, shape, or form, but we're just grateful on behalf of our athletic department, on behalf of all of our former student athletes, our football program, that we have one slight tiny piece of the pie in terms of our contributions towards fighting COVID-19. But I just wanted to share that for those of you that were not aware of it. And it was really very beneficial in terms of the hospital. I know how much they appreciate it, and it's a field hospital right now. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you, but I wanted to say to Marcellus, thank you. This has been awesome. It's been really enjoyable. It's, you know, one of the great things about Zoom is you get to see people, you get to see their smile. You have one of the all-time, your first team Hall of Fame smile. It's great to see. We appreciate all that you do for Columbia, the way that you continue to interact with us, all your tremendous support in a lot of different ways, shapes, and forms. But we appreciate your insight into the draft. We appreciate all the way that you represent our institution and for your fellowship. So thank you very much.
Oh, appreciate you guys so much. And I have one question I just want to throw at you, Peter. Just in terms of fall in football in particular, like, is there anything that can be told, or is there any understandings on how that looks on the calendar?
You know, I think we recognize Los Angeles, we're kind of in an epicenter here for COVID-19. And so we're looking at a lot of different models. We actually have a lot more flexibility than some other schools, especially the Power Five. If you think about our schedule, you know, we play only 10 games. We play 3 non-conference games. I mean, there could be a scenario where we come back in October and we play our Ivy League schedule and we crown an Ivy League champion. And, you know, it wouldn't have a tremendous, you know, obviously our crowds are meaningful, but we could, it's not going to be the end of the world if we don't have a lot of people in the stadium. And I just want to get an opportunity for our student athletes to compete. There are crazy models that you're looking at, you've probably heard, where, you know, football gets shifted to the spring. We'll see how those go. You know, we're just right now, we can't answer the question on what's going to happen in the fall, but we're looking at a lot of different things. I was on a Zoom call earlier today with our with all of our coaches They're doing a lot of virtual recruiting. They're preparing. They're having great interaction with their student athletes. You can only imagine the complications of having 800 student athletes in 800 different locations and literally all over the world. But you should be proud of what our coaches are doing right now and how that they're maintaining the value system that we have at Columbia, and something that all of us, really, really hope that we can do moving forward. So more to come, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of areas that we can't answer questions, but let's hope for the best and hope that we can get back on the football field and compete.
All right. Respect. I appreciate it, Peter. Thanks, Eric.
All right.
Everybody.
Thanks, everybody. All the best, everybody, and be safe. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We appreciate it.
My man.